born on April 11, 1935, in Jersey City, New Jersey. His early years were marked by severe abuse from his father and neglect from his mother, shaping the cold and violent nature that defined him later. As a boy, he developed a disturbing reputation for cruelty, later admitting that he experimented by killing animals in his neighborhood, an early sign of the brutality that would dominate his adult life. During his teenage years, Kuklinski committed his first murder after a street confrontation, long before he had any ties to organized crime. Over time, his killings became more methodical and ruthless. He earned the nickname the Iceman after freezing his victims' bodies to obscure the true time of death, a tactic that frustrated investigators. Kuklinski soon caught the attention of powerful crime figures in New York and New Jersey, becoming associated with the Gambino crime family and others. As a contract killer, he was valued for his unpredictability and efficiency. He employed a wide range of methods: guns, cyanide, strangulation, and unusual techniques that made him both effective and terrifying. Behind this violent career, he built the image of a suburban family man. Living quietly with his wife and children in New Jersey, he kept his double life hidden from neighbors and even from his own household. Kuklinski later boasted of killing more than 100 people, though authorities were only able to confirm a fraction of those murders. His reign of violence ended in 1986 when he was arrested in a major undercover operation. Convicted of multiple killings, he was sentenced to life in prison. While incarcerated, he gave a series of interviews in which he described his crimes in chilling detail and without remorse. These accounts secured his place as one of America's most feared contract killers. Richard "the Iceman" Kuklinski died in prison in 2006 at age 70, leaving behind a legacy of violence that blurred the line between mob assassin and serial killer. Sammy "the Bull" Gravano. He was born on March 12, 1945, in Brooklyn, New York, to Sicilian immigrants. Salvatore Sammy Gravano grew up struggling with dyslexia, which made school difficult. He instead found belonging on the streets, earning respect from gangs through toughness. His fearless stand in a lopsided fight earned him the nickname the Bull. By his teens, Gravano had already drawn the attention of local mobsters. He eventually joined the Gambino crime family, one of America's most powerful mafia groups. Rising quickly, he built a reputation as both a dependable earner and a ruthless enforcer. Directly tied to nearly 20 murders, either committing them or giving orders, he became feared and respected. His skill and loyalty impressed John Gotti, who seized power by orchestrating the assassination of boss Paul Castellano. Gravano played a key role in that hit, and afterward Gotti elevated him to underboss, making him second in command of an empire raking in millions through gambling, extortion, construction rackets, and narcotics. But his power was short-lived. By the early 1990s, the FBI had compiled extensive evidence against Gotti and his closest allies. Facing life in prison, Gravano made a stunning move. He turned government witness. His testimony in 1991 secured Gotti's conviction on multiple charges, ending the reign of the Teflon Don. Gravano's betrayal rocked the underworld. He became the highest-ranking mobster in U.S. history to cooperate with federal authorities, shattering the code of silence that defined mafia loyalty. After prison and a stint in witness protection, he resurfaced in Arizona, but was later arrested again for running an ecstasy operation. Despite the contradictions, ruthless killer, mob underboss, government witness, Sammy the Bull Gravano remains one of the most infamous figures in mafia history, remembered both for his violence and the betrayal that toppled America's most notorious crime boss. Joseph Crazy Joe Gallo. Born on April 7, 1929, in Brooklyn, New York. Raised in a tough neighborhood, he quickly gained a reputation for being fearless and volatile. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia as a teenager, many believe this fueled his violent nature and erratic behavior. Unlike most mobsters who preferred anonymity, Gallo thrived on attention and cultivated an image that set him apart. By the 1950s, Gallo had become a rising figure in the Profasi crime family, later known as the Colombo family. Alongside his brothers Larry and Albert, he ran a crew involved in loan sharking, extortion, and contract killings. Gallo was tied to several high-profile murders, including the assassination of former Gambino boss Albert Anastasia, who was famously shot while getting a haircut in a Manhattan barbershop. Gallo's ambitions soon brought him into direct conflict with family boss Joe Profasi. Their feud erupted into the First Colombo War, a violent power struggle between Gallo's faction and Profasi loyalists. It was during this time that he earned the nickname Crazy Joe, not only for his ruthlessness but also for his eccentricity. He famously kept exotic pets like a lion in his apartment and mingled openly with artists, writers, and celebrities, embracing the spotlight in a way few mobsters dared. In the early 1960s, Gallo was convicted of extortion and sentenced to nearly a decade in prison. Behind bars, he reinvented himself, studying, reading extensively, and cultivating a more refined persona. Released in 1971, he returned to mob life but also maintained close ties with New York's cultural and celebrity circles, which amplified his notoriety in the media. That fame, however, could not shield him from mob rivalries. On April 7, 1972, his 43rd birthday, Gallo was gunned down at Umberto's Clam House in Little Italy, a killing linked to the Colombo family conflict. Though his reign was brief, Joey Gallo's mix of violence, flamboyance, and rebellion cemented him as one of the most colorful figures in American mafia history, a gangster remembered as much for his eccentric lifestyle as for his blood-soaked legacy. Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss. He was born in 1909 in Brooklyn, New York. Despite the nickname, he had no real ties to Pittsburgh. The name was simply a street alias. From an early age, he was drawn to crime, beginning with petty theft before quickly escalating to violent work. Unlike mobsters who chased wealth or status, Strauss became infamous for one thing: his reliability as a killer. Strauss rose to prominence as a key figure in Murder Incorporated, the Mafia's enforcement arm during the 1930s and 40s. This secret group acted as organized crime's murder-for-hire squad, carrying out contract hits nationwide. Even among these hardened killers, Strauss stood out. He was known for his cruelty, creativity, and efficiency, never hesitating to accept an assignment. Authorities later tied him to more than 100 murders, though he was notorious for never carrying a gun. Instead, he favored knives, ice picks, ropes, or even his bare hands. He reportedly carried a satchel of tools, ready to improvise on the spot, which gave him a reputation as the mob's most resourceful and unpredictable executioner. For years, Strauss operated unchecked, carrying out murders with near impunity. But in the early 1940s, Murder Incorporated began to unravel. Fellow hitman Abe "Kid Twist" Reles turned informant, providing testimony that directly implicated Strauss in countless killings. His cooperation marked a turning point for prosecutors determined to dismantle the syndicate. In 1941, Strauss was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. On June 12, 1941, he was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison in New York. His execution symbolized the downfall of Murder Incorporated, as law enforcement used informants and trials to dismantle the once-feared group. Strauss's legacy endures as one of pure brutality. Unlike mob bosses who sought power, Strauss embodied the role of a mercenary killer, loyal only to the job and remorseless in execution. Even in the violent annals of organized crime, Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss remains one of its most prolific and cold-blooded enforcers. Abe "Kid Twist" Reles. Born in 1906 in Brooklyn to Austrian Jewish immigrants, Abe Reles grew up in Brownsville, a neighborhood ruled by gangs. Violence became his path early, and by his teens he earned the nickname Kid Twist for stabbing victims with a knife and twisting it, a brutal signature that made him feared and hated. In the 1930s, Reles became one of the most notorious killers in Murder Incorporated, the Mafia's enforcement arm. Alongside Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss and others, he carried out contract hits ordered by mob bosses. Known for his ruthlessness and efficiency, he was said to be responsible for countless murders. His weapon of choice, a long ice pick, became infamous on New York streets and helped cement his reputation as one of the era's most feared assassins. Everything changed in 1940 when Reles, facing serious charges in the electric chair, chose to cooperate with authorities. His testimony devastated Murder Incorporated, sending members to prison and even helping convict powerful bosses like Louis Lep Buckleter and Albert Anastasia. Breaking the Mafia's code of silence, he became one of the most famous informants in U.S. history. But betrayal carried consequences. On November 12, 1941, while under constant police guard at the Half Moon Hotel in Coney Island, Reles plunged from a sixth-floor window. Officials labeled it an escape attempt, but most suspected he was thrown to his death to silence him before more testimony. Because police were stationed just outside his door, his death remains one of organized crime's great mysteries. Abe "Kid Twist" Reles' story ended violently, but his legacy endures. A feared assassin turned government witness whose fall proved that even under protection, no one was safe from the Mafia's reach. Frank the Dasher Abbandando. Born in 1910 in Brooklyn, New York, to an Italian-American family. Growing up in the same tough neighborhoods that produced countless gangsters, he stood out not for business savvy but for violence. Quick, ruthless, and eager to prove himself, he earned the nickname the Dasher for his fast, efficient style in both street fights and killings. By the 1930s, Abbandando became a core member of Murder Incorporated, the Mafia's enforcement squad that handled contract killings nationwide. He quickly gained a reputation as one of its most active assassins. Authorities later tied him to more than 30 murders, though some believe the true count was higher. His signature methods set him apart. Instead of relying solely on guns, he favored strangulation with piano wire, ice picks, or even his bare hands, tactics that terrified victims and made it difficult for prosecutors to link him to crimes. Within Murder Incorporated, he became valued as a dependable soldier, fast, precise, and without hesitation. But like many in the syndicate, Abbandando's career collapsed when fellow hitman Abe "Kid Twist" Reles turned informant in the early 1940s. Reles' testimony directly implicated him as the killer in numerous murders, leaving prosecutors with enough evidence to convict. In 1941, Abbandando was sentenced to death. On February 19, 1942, he was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. His execution marked another blow to Murder Incorporated, proving that even its most feared killers couldn't escape justice once the Mafia's code of silence was broken. Frank the Dasher Abbandando is remembered as one of organized crime's deadliest specialists, a killer whose swiftness earned him a nickname, but whose brutality secured his place in mob history. Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner, born on September 26, 1902, in Calabria, Italy, and immigrated to New York as a teenager. He worked on the Brooklyn docks, but his violent streak soon made him more feared as a brawler and enforcer than as a laborer. His temper and ruthless efficiency set him apart from other young gangsters. By the 1930s, Anastasia became one of the founders of Murder Incorporated, the Mafia's enforcement arm that carried out contract killings nationwide. At its peak, the squad was tied to hundreds of murders, with Anastasia not only overseeing operations but also taking part himself. His role earned him one of the most chilling nicknames in mob history, the Lord High Executioner. During the bloody Castellano-Maurice War of the early 1930s, he aligned with Charles Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, helping shape the modern Mafia's power structure. His reputation as a loyal yet brutal killer cemented his standing as a valuable ally. Anastasia's power peaked in 1951 when he became boss of what would later be known as the Gambino crime family. Under his reign, the family grew rich through labor racketeering, construction, gambling, and dominance over the docks and unions. Yet his erratic temper and appetite for violence alarmed even his fellow mob bosses, who saw him as reckless and destabilizing. On October 25, 1957, Anastasia met a violent end. While sitting in a barber's chair at Manhattan's Park Sheraton Hotel, masked gunmen stormed in and gunned him down. The assassination, widely believed to have been ordered by rival boss Vito Genovese with support from others, shocked the nation and made front-page headlines. Anastasia's legacy remains twofold: a feared executioner who helped build Murder Incorporated, and a powerful mafia boss undone by his own volatility. His barbershop slaying endures as one of the most infamous murders in organized crime history. Roy DeMeo, born on September 7, 1940, in Brooklyn, New York, to an Italian-American family. From a young age, he gravitated toward crime, loan sharking, car theft, and hustling on the streets. By adulthood, he had gained a reputation as both an owner and an enforcer, traits that drew the attention of the Gambino crime family. In the 1970s, DeMeo was formally inducted, but instead of focusing on gambling or rackets, he built his name on something darker: murder. He formed the DeMeo Crew, a group of loyal associates who became one of the most feared killing squads in mob history. Authorities estimate the crew committed up to 200 murders between the 1970s and early 1980s. Their signature was the Gemini Method. Victims were lured into the Gemini Lounge, shot in the head, stabbed in the heart to stop bleeding, and then dismembered in the back room. The remains were bagged as garbage, leaving little trace. Cold and methodical, the process made the crew infamous even among fellow mobsters. The crew killed for Gambino orders, disputes over drugs and debts, or simply out of paranoia. Their savagery was so extreme that other crime families hesitated to cross them. Yet DeMeo's violent streak became a liability. His involvement in auto theft, drug deals, and his unpredictable behavior drew mounting law enforcement pressure. By 1982, Gambino boss Paul Castellano saw him as too dangerous to keep alive. On January 10, 1983, DeMeo was found stuffed in the trunk of a car, riddled with bullets. Most believe his own men, acting under Castellano's orders, carried out the hit. DeMeo's legacy is remembered not for wealth or rackets but for blood. Unlike mobsters who balanced business with violence, DeMeo's empire revolved around killing, securing his place as one of the most ruthless figures in Mafia history. Anthony "Gaspipe" Casso, born on May 21, 1942, in Brooklyn, New York. Raised in an Italian-American neighborhood, he dropped out of school early and drifted into organized crime. By his teens, he was already earning for the Lucci's crime family, where brutality, loyalty, and street smarts helped him rise through the ranks. His nickname Gaspipe came from carrying a length of pipe as a weapon in his youth, a fitting label for a man who would become infamous for violence. Over the years, Casso was tied to more than 36 murders, either carried out personally or ordered through others. His victims included rival mobsters, suspected informants, and even bystanders caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. By the 1980s, Casso rose to underboss of the Lucchese family, making him one of the most powerful figures in New York's underworld. But with power came cruelty. He was notorious for torture, burning, beating, and electrocuting victims to send a message or extract information. Even fellow mobsters feared his volatility. In the early 1990s, law enforcement closed in with racketeering and murder charges. After a manhunt, Casso was captured in 1993. Facing life, he made a stunning move. He flipped. As one of the highest-ranking mafia figures to turn informant, he revealed staggering amounts of intelligence, from mob operations to corrupt officials and even NYPD ties. But Casso's violent nature never faded. In custody, he threatened guards, clashed with inmates, and became too unstable to trust. Prosecutors dropped him, and the super informant was cast aside. Casso was sentenced to multiple life terms and spent the rest of his life in federal prison, where he died in 2020. His legacy is twofold: a feared killer who terrorized even his allies, and a potential mafia witness who destroyed his own chance at redemption. John Martorano, born on December 13, 1940, in Somerville, Massachusetts. Raised in a working-class Italian-American family, he grew up tough on the streets of Boston, where crime and loyalty shaped daily life. By his teens, he was already drifting into the city's underworld, drawn by the money, respect, and protection it offered. By the 1970s, Martorano had become a trusted enforcer for the Winter Hill Gang, led by James Whitey Bulger and Stephen the Rifleman Flemmi. Bulger brought leadership, Flemmi supplied strategy, and Martorano delivered muscle. He became the gang's designated hitman, feared for his efficiency and cold precision. Over his career, Martorano admitted to killing 20 people. These weren't crimes of passion. They were calculated hits ordered to silence witnesses, eliminate rivals, or remove anyone Bulger and Flemmi wanted gone. For Martorano, murder became just business, a chilling reflection of how routine killing had become for him. By the 1990s, federal pressure closed in on Boston's mob world. As Bulger and Flemmi's empire began to crumble, Martorano saw his loyalty would only buy him a life sentence. In 1999, he made his move. He flipped. Martorano confessed to his 20 murders and testified against his former allies, including Bulger. His testimony shook Boston, exposing not only mob secrets but also FBI corruption that had shielded Bulger for years. In exchange for his cooperation, Martorano served just 12 years in prison, a shocking deal that outraged victims' families, who couldn't fathom how a confessed contract killer could walk free. John Martorano's legacy is one of contradiction: a loyal mob soldier turned government witness, a killer who admitted it all yet regained freedom. He remains one of Boston's most haunting examples of how loyalty, betrayal, and survival collide in organized crime. Tony Spilotro, the Chicago Outfit's enforcer. Born on May 19, 1938, in Chicago, Illinois, the son of Italian immigrants who ran a small restaurant. While most of his brothers lived relatively honest lives, Tony's temper and taste for violence pushed him toward the Chicago Outfit. By his 20s, he was a fully initiated soldier, already feared for his ruthlessness. Spilotro made his name as an enforcer, loyal, merciless, and brutally inventive. He used torture and intimidation to send messages for the outfit, earning a reputation that terrified even seasoned criminals. His brand of violence made him useful, but it also made him dangerous. In the 1970s, the outfit sent Spilotro to Las Vegas to safeguard their casino interests. At a time when mobsters still skimmed millions from the tables, his job was to keep order and protect profits. Instead, Spilotro built his own crew of burglars and extortionists, nicknamed the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang for their method of drilling through walls during heists. But Spilotro couldn't stay in the shadows. His public intimidation, unauthorized robberies, and reputation for torture attracted unwanted heat. Federal agents began cracking down on mob activity in Vegas, and the outfit grew tired of the chaos he brought. What was meant to be quiet control turned into a spotlight of attention. By 1986, his standing had collapsed. Tony and his brother Michael were lured to a basement in Bensonville, Illinois, under the pretense of a meeting. There, both were savagely beaten to death by fellow mobsters. Their bodies were later found buried in an Indiana cornfield, a brutal end to a violent life. Spilotro's story became infamous not just in mob lore but also in pop culture, immortalized in Martin Scorsese's Casino. His legacy remains a warning inside the underworld. Unchecked violence may build fear, but it can also bring down even the most feared enforcer. Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano. Born on November 14, 1913, in Cleveland, Ohio. Drawn early to petty crime, he slipped into rackets, loan sharking, and street violence. His charm earned him the nickname the Weasel, but beneath it was a ruthless enforcer who would spend decades in the Mafia shadows. By the 1940s, Fratiano moved west and joined the Los Angeles crime family, a quieter branch of Cosa Nostra that still controlled gambling, unions, and rackets. He thrived as a feared hitman and reliable owner, someone who brought in money and wasn't afraid to kill when called upon. His ruthlessness pushed him up the ladder. By the 1970s, he held a leadership role and even served briefly as acting boss. Yet his constant scheming and paranoia left him isolated. To many in the outfit, he was useful but dangerous. By 1977, facing indictments and suspecting betrayal from within, Fratiano made a shocking move. He flipped. Unlike past turncoats, he wasn't a small-time soldier. He was a former boss. His cooperation marked the first time a Mafia leader publicly testified against organized crime. The fallout was massive. Fratiano guided prosecutors through the inner workings of the mob in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and beyond. His testimony helped secure dozens of convictions and fueled landmark racketeering cases that broke Mafia power in the late 20th century. But his betrayal left him marked for death. Forced into witness protection, Fratiano lived quietly until his death from natural causes in 1993 at age 79, escaping the usual mob fate of prison or execution. Fratiano's legacy stands apart. He was both feared hitman and high-ranking boss, yet ultimately remembered as the godfather who turned on the Mafia, helping dismantle the empire he once served.